Thank
Good evening, members. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for joining us at the Wine Society's Global Staples Online event. My name's Gil. I'm one of the event managers at the Society, and I'm pleased to be joined by two of my colleagues. I've got Paolo. Hello, Paolo.
Hello.
And Jim.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you both for joining tonight. Thank you for hosting tonight's event with me on this rather dark and cool Friday. Members, thank you, of course, very much for joining us as well. Before we start talking a little bit about the theme and about the concept of tonight, as I mentioned there, this is our Global Staples. It forms part of our monthly food and wine online sessions that we're hoping to continue into the new year and beyond. But this is the very first, it's our inaugural Global Staples.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
We are we've had a lot of fun actually putting this together, researching some dishes, certainly researching the wines and pairing. So members, if you do have any of our three dishes in your order, or indeed any of the wines as well to pair, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you have on your plate, what you have in your glass, or maybe you've opted for something completely different, or none at all. Either way, we love to hear from you and interact with you as best we can. And you can do that through the chat feature here on Zoom. Just message there to all users, or indeed to us as panelists, and let us know where you're joining us from and what you've got in front of you. If you have any questions for Paolo, Jim, or I, please do pop that into the Q&A feature also here on Zoom. That way we'll be able to see it much clearer and hopefully be able to get to answer the question, and then hopefully be able to answer the question as best as we can.
We will certainly try.
And of course, hopefully no connectivity issues, no problems in terms of sound or anything technical there. But if you do suffer any issues there, you can let us know via the chat feature or get us via email, tastings@thewinesociety.com. Right. I think that's enough of the housekeeping. Do you think?
I think so.
Yes, I think so, yes.
So as mentioned there, this is our debut of our global staples. But what do we mean when we talk about staple foods? Essentially, these are foods that are widely consumed the world over, of incredible importance. They constitute the majority of a person's diet, and often a lot of, or if not all of a person's energies and nutrients come through these staple foods. I think that's fair to say.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. They're consumed daily, if not multiple times a day. They're very accessible. They're inexpensive, but they do change in terms of the importance of the various staple foods from country to country, nation to nation, culture as well, dependent entirely on the sort of situation, I suppose, on the ground. So terrain, tastes, among many other things there as well. And if you want to jump in with anything I've missed there in the initial.
No, well, I mean, obviously it varies country to country, region to region, but there are a lot of similarities. You kind of see pairings, and which we'll probably get into with the whole, grains and pulses, that it's the whole world over. It is a constant that does stay. It's just the little tweakings and the little touches that change.
And most of these staple foods are plant-based. I mean, sort of animal products, whether that be meat or dairy or other such, it also plays its part. Right?
Yes.
But the vast majority are plant-based. I think I read somewhere that there's sort of 50,000 edible plants globally.
Yes.
But only around 15 of those sort of make up about 90% of these staple foods and our kind of daily intake of nutrients. So whilst we're talking, we are very much talking about a very small portion of or proportion of food groups that are of huge global significance and importance.
Yes.
And so we kind of thought, when we were putting our heads together about a food and wine event and what could we come up with, this felt like a good concept. We hope you agree. We've had, as I say, a lot of fun putting the beginnings, this debut event. Our grains and pulses is the theme for tonight. But over the course of the various sessions, we'll look at things like rice will have its own individual session. We'll look at tomatoes, potatoes, and a few others sort of follow that theme. But we felt tonight, as the seasons changed, it's becoming a bit cooler. It's, the nights are drawing in, I think, as they describe it. Grains and pulses, for me at least, it felt like the right,
definitely,
the right sort of area there. There's a kind of warmth and a comfort that I get out of these dishes and out of these foods.
Yes.
But a lot of health benefits as well, which we'll probably come on to.
Absolutely,
Yes.
So without further ado there, Paolo, I'm going to look over to you.
Yes.
Do you want to kick things off with grains and what do we mean when we say grains and pulses?
Shall we talk about barley before we I think we start anything? We have a dish here with barley. It's well known, worldwide, especially in the East, where they, Greek and Turkey, they use quite a lot of it. It's the largest grain crop globally grown after rice and corn. So barley is commonly used in breads, but we also make beer with it. You can make soup, you can make stews, health products, and is primarily grown as an animal fodder and a source of malt for alcoholic beverage, especially beer. So you can use for multiple things, and it's great. And we grow quite a lot in England. That so yeah.
I think barley, a fact that I love about barley is, and I believe this to be accurate, at least sort of a couple of years ago, but roughly 70% is it of the world's
Yes.
barley grown goes into animal
Feed, yeah.
Yes.
So only 30% is either beer or whiskies or other sort of drinks in that respect, and food. So it's widely planted. It's incredibly important in many ways, not just for our consumption of the actual product, but for what we then get from it through animal feed and etc. So yeah, and we'll come on to barley, I suppose, a little bit more when we talk about our second dish. Oh, sorry, no, the first dish, pearl barley. So the differences between grains and pulses in terms of what they are. I mean, they're both seeds, but
yeah, both seeds. Obviously, your grains are your sort of the seed pod from normally it's a grass type plant, whereas obviously your pulse it's a dried seed from what's the word, leguminous.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yes.
Apologies if I mispronounced that one. From legumes, as we call them. So your beans, your peas,
lentils, and
absolutely.
Soybeans as well.
Chickpeas,
Yeah.
And there's many different sort of beans as well. We can carry on talking about all night,
Yes.
but yeah.
But of huge importance. I think again, 51% of sort of food products that give us around 51% or so. So only over half of the nutrients and minerals all come from essentially 3 or 4 grains.
Yes.
So even of those 15, it fairly narrows down to the likes of rice and wheat, corn, barley. So yeah, again, why we thought this is a great place to start as well with a food group that is so vitally important, but incredibly nutritious, as we're sort of more and more finding. And we find grains in particular, like quinoa, I'm thinking about, which with this sort of new superfood burst onto the scene in the early 2000s, 2003, 4, that sort of time. I think in the UK at least.
That's where it became a thing.
It became a thing,
yeah.
And it's now something that you see in all supermarkets, pretty much across.
Absolutely.
And other grains are sort of following a bit of trend, but not as successfully as quinoa, or at least not yet. But we're seeing much more importance, I suppose, as the world kind of shrinks a bit with global travel, and we're able to connect much more with foods from around the world. We're kind of, in the UK at least, we're experimenting more with different foods, which can only be a good thing as well as we diversify what we're eating.
Definitely. You're also seeing a little bit of a trend with sort of these heritage varieties. So we saw it with things like tomatoes, with a lot of fruits and veg. But yeah, people starting to experiment with these historic grain varieties, with these different pulses that have been, grown and cultivated in one particular area for, potentially thousands of years. But for reasons that they're maybe a little bit more tricky to grow, they're a little bit more pernickety with the climate that they need. So a lot of people are starting to sort of really dive into that, and you're getting these sort of almost typicity that you get with grapes, with wine. So it's a really nice crossover as well.
Amazing. Yes. So you mentioned barley.
Yes.
Straight off there. So I think as that forms the base of our first dish.
Yes, it is actually a good. We've got a dish here that we sort of change it from rice to barley. We made a sort of risotto with butternut squash. There's a little bit of Parmesan cheese on it, but you can make all sorts of things with barley, really, because people actually sometimes they are not confident in doing dishes and trying different things. But barley is quite good because you can actually substitute from rice and other grains. So we made a risotto with spiced butternut squash, a bit of Parmesan cheese, and it's lovely. It's as good as rice. So yeah.
So I'm just going to share. Let's see if I can get this to work. Share an image of. So this is the plate of food we have in front of us.
That's
Yes.
right. Yes.
This is hopefully an easier way of us showing we have my attempts
Tilting it
to tip the
back and-
screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's pearl barley
Yes.
rather than, so it's not technically the kind of whole grain. This has been polished or pearl.
Yes, it's
so
been
sort
polished.
of
Yes.
a lot of that natural kind of the
Yeah.
husk has been.
And it's very low in starch, but it's rich in sugar.
Mhm.
It's lovely. It's as half Italian, I would say that it's as good as risotto.
Mhm.
It's nice.
But I love how it feels. There's a lovely texture
Yes.
with pearl barley. It soaks up any
It's just
sauces or
absorbs
anything,
It does
right?
indeed, yeah.
And it just locks in all that flavor and just holds on to everything there. But it feels quite, I don't know if fluffy is the right term, perhaps not. But if there's a
It seems
a
to me that
lightness almost
it doesn't
as well.
sort of overcook because risotto rice you can overcook and
Mhm.
it can become like a sort of mushy thing.
Mm.
Pearl barley won't do that unless you leave on the stove for 3 hours, which is not what we do. But it's lovely. The texture is lovely. The flavor is very nice. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
great.
I think, like you say, because it has got a lower starch content to rice, when you're cooking it like this, it doesn't get as kind of heavy and rich.
Yes.
So if you ever fancy risotto, but you're already a little bit full because you've already had a massive lunch. This is
That's
quite a
the
nice
alternative.
exactly,
Yes, exactly. Yes.
because we've all been there.
Yes.
And remind me, sorry, because you probably mentioned there straight up, but how long after prep, in terms of the cooking of this, how long does it take?
Pearl barley usually it depends how you cook it. I cook as like a risotto, so you have onions, you have a lot of butter, and then you have vegetable stock. Gil, it takes more or less the same time, between 30 and 40 minutes, to be ready. But I'm talking about al dente. If you want to cook a little bit more, probably another 10, 15 minutes, you'd be a bit more like soft.
Mhm.
But it's great, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't wait any longer.
I was going to say,
Apologies.
We're getting past that.
Yeah, members, if you've got this dish in front, I'll try and read some of the chat. The camera's a little bit further away from me than it normally is, so I'll see what I can do there. Yes, barley has a nice bite,
Absolutely.
slightly chewy. Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Good in Irish stew. That seems to me like something we need to be
So I think
researching.
Yes.
the first sort of contact I had with barley was in a well-known soup brand. Probably I could mention it, but I'm not going to. A well-known brand of soup, their Scotch broth.
Mm.
And that was a staple when I was at university.
Yeah.
It's it's rich, it's warming, and the barley in there, it's got bite, it's soft, it's
Yes.
fluffy, and it just absorbs all that flavor.
Thank you for using that fluffy term. I thought I was way off. That's very kind of you to throw that back in.
I mean, maybe you've just planted that idea.
Maybe.
So who knows? So yeah, that was kind of my first touch point with it, and it's a wonderful grain. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
I saw there as well on the chat. I think hopefully you can all hear us all right now. Hopefully any of those issues have sort of resolved themselves. But we'll try and talk a little louder as well, sort of enunciate, or I will. You guys are fine.
I can
I will
definitely
try and
enunciate
enunciate a little more. But right, so that's our first dish. This beautiful pearl barley risotto.
Yes.
What have we paired this with? That's the next question.
It is. So risotto it's something that I like to pair with white wines. Obvious choice, very simple. You've got a lot of richness, a lot of depth from the butter, from the cheese, from the the grain itself. So you're looking for something with a decent amount of acidity. Chardonnay is an obvious choice. It's rich, it's sort of citrusy to kind of balance things out. But we have gone for the family Mantler Gruner Veltliner from Austria. And I think it's a wonderful match. It's a little bit lighter than a than a lot of Chardonnays, but it has that lovely crisp acidity that just cuts through all the cheese, all the starch, all the sort of the weight of the risotto itself. And so when we were tasting before with a few other bits and pieces, we found that it kind of lifted everything, and it brought out a lot of the peppery notes that you get in Gruner, as well as the citrus, the blossom. Whereas some of the other wines balance it in different ways. We tried with a couple of other different wines. Viognier is a fantastic pairing with it. Again, it's got the acidity, but it's a little bit weightier. So you know, if you're looking for real comfort food, I think this with a nice Viognier would be absolutely cracking.
And it was something that we noticed when we tasted. And so I've just put the wine on the screen there, so hopefully you can see the wine that we're tasting here at Mantler. But when we tried all three of these dishes with a couple of options, you know, just all worked really well.
Yes.
But what I found really exciting, and that was they all had different interactions,
Yes.
and none were necessarily better than others. They just took it on a different journey. Different elements of the dish came out, and as you said, the Viognier had a weightier and a richer feel to it, like a kind of nice warm hug in there with the food. Whereas we decided on the Gruner for that extra energy, the acidity, and that pepperiness just gave an extra dimension. You mentioned that hallmark character.
And the flavor of the sage as well, which it can be quite strong, but with this wine it's just perfect because it sort of cuts through and it's lovely. Yes.
Yeah. Very much right. I'm going to try it with the wine. Did you want to
that seems reasonable. I'll stop
say a little bit about Mantler, perhaps?
Yeah. So Mantler themselves, they're based in Lower Austria. We got a map actually. I believe we do.
There we are.
There we go. So in that lovely red corner, sort of the northeast.
Northeast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I struggle with directions. So they're based down there. It's a lovely family estate, very much in line with our views as a business. You know, all about sort of site specifics, doing the best you can with the land that you've got, not trying to overcomplicate things. Keeping things as clean and as close to the grapes and the vineyard itself as possible. You know, it is very much a family affair. It's Thomas, his wife Sarah, I think his brother Benedict, I believe. Yep. He's involved as well. So it's a proper family business, and they're really lovely people as well, which always makes a big difference.
Incredibly nice people. Yeah, and I think that the family have had viticulture within their farm for over 100 years. That the family's multiple generation, but really it was the 1970s when Thomas and Benedict's father Carl really started to take viticulture up a gear, and sort of that took more precedence in terms of the plantings. They would plant more vines, and it became more of a business. That was 1977, I think, was when it really sort of started. Which for a region, this Weinviertel kind of area, the largest wine region of Austria that we showed there on the map, it really viticulture started to take off the region as a whole in the 80s.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, Carl and the family were sort of ahead of that time. They kind of saw the potential a few years earlier and kind of were part of that movement that sort of spearheaded it. But what I quite liked, and this is, I will own completely, this is completely by accident, members. This was not by design. But again, looking a little bit further into the region itself around their village of Eberbrunn, sort of whatever they are, I think 25 kilometers just north of the Danube River, and that kind of area, very flat sort of low-lying fields, but undulating hills there. But it's really a kind of wheat was a huge wheat fields. Yeah, it was hugely important in that region. So completely by accident that we have sort of picked a wine that has grown up in and surrounded by a grain. Right? Yes. But it kind of, and actually that's the case for all three of these wines, again, by complete fortune, but kind of proves the point, I suppose, that these are food groups that are so widely planted. And so
they're everywhere. Yeah, they're huge.
We're bound to, I suppose, find this. But I thought that was quite a nice little addition as I was looking into the region a little bit more. But as I said, this area was the very first to gain a DAC, so Austria's kind of appellation contrôlée, the kind of French, this demarcated area where Grüne Veltliner was the only grape variety allowed to be labeled as DAC, as a kind of clearly defined wine with minimum alcohol levels and from a very defined region on areas. So this was the very first in 2002, I think, was when that was formed. Okay. So a good 20 years after kind of viticulture really took off in the area. But yeah, Thomas, Benedict, the whole family, it's organic principles, it's wholesome principles, it's very much family ethos. And as you say, kind of ticks the box in terms of our own ethos here in society. Yeah. So we love the wine, we love the producer. Hopefully you do too if you're trying this, or if you've had it before.
Yeah, if you've tried it, let us know. I think it's we've said before, it's a lovely Gruner. It's a little bit different to what you'd tend to expect. I think it's a little bit it's a bit richer. I think it's not as sort of piercing in its acidity and the minerality that you sometimes get. So it's quite a nice, approachable wine. We almost call it a gateway Gruner.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got friends that you really want to get them into some lovely Austrian wines, this would be a great place to start, especially with some delicious risotto as well.
Thank you very much.
But it has that hallmark. So the final product for me, Grüner Veltliner, white pepper. It's that in aroma and a little on that palate as well. Some wines present a little bit more, but that's a good Gruner has to have that for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I seek. And if I ever have it in a blind tasting, I love the fact that it has that, because there aren't many grapes that have that character. So that's, if anything, that's a little bit more of a confident guess on my part in a blind taste. But I still get them wrong as much as I get them right.
That's half the fun, though.
There we go.
That's all the fun.
Right. Shall we look at the second?
Let's move on to the number two.
Second dish. So
let me just move this.
I'll bring that
That
one
one down.
forward.
There we go. Fantastic. So much food, so little space. What a terrible problem to have.
But yes, so the second dish,
Bulgur wheat, aren't we?
bulgur wheat. So again, I suppose a bit like pearl barley, it's not the whole grain. This is again, bulgur wheat is a process, or I don't mean processed,
Yes.
but there's a process to get to bulgur wheat. It's not a naturally occurring.
Yeah.
Am I right then?
They break the grains.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
So they kind of well, you explain.
Well, what they do, they actually break the grains because it's quite the grains of bulgur wheat is bigger than the pear barley, so they break a little bit, so it can make it easy to cook and easy to eat. This is being known as a non-scientific grease in the Middle East. They use quite a lot of it. It's different from couscous, but there is a similarity on texture. Bulgur wheat is broken, and couscous is more like sort of round. But it's a lovely thing, to have on a dish, and it's easy to cook as well. Yeah.
And we haven't gone for this particular dish, but when I think of bulgur, I think of like tubula and other dishes like that, Quebec as well. But it has a lovely nuttiness, doesn't it? But I think this particular dish, if I'm remembering it correctly, actually no, all three of these I enjoyed. There wasn't like a favorite between them, but this has a lovely kind of spicy kick in the particular.
Yes,
dish.
exactly.
I think it sits really nicely with it, and like what we. Quite interesting thing that I found out about bulgur wheat is it can be made from any kind of wheat.
Yes.
Which traditionally or typically it's durum. So the same thing we get pasta out of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be any wheat that's cracked, parboiled, and that's it. Which is it's interesting. So durum wheat is the second most widely planted type of wheat.
And
in case you wanted to know,
it doesn't take long to cook as well. Because bulgur wheat, you can make a dish within, let's say, 20 minutes, half an hour, because it doesn't take too long to cook. Usually it's boiled, but what I did here is just like I had some really nice chicken stock, and I cooked slowly on it, and then we had the parsnips and carrots with quite a bit of chili flakes, honey, extra virgin olive oil, and it's a lovely dish.
Right.
Am I right in thinking as well? You don't have to technically cook it. You can kind of sit it in stock, warm stock, and you just kind of leave it.
Yes, like beans, you can just soak it.
Yeah.
In stock, for a couple of hours, and you'll be done.
That's brilliant. So I can soak it in the morning. By the time I get home,
exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
dinner's ready.
And of course, I may well be pronouncing this wrong, but frikke is a sort of form. It's a young green wheat that's smoked, but made in a similar way to bulgur. So that I hadn't realised that the two were as closely kind of aligned as
Related, yes.
I thought they were completely
Yeah, it's
different.
like slightly germinated, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
But again, another of those we mentioned quinoa, but another of these sort of grains that's rising in terms of popularity and frequency of us seeing them available, seeing it available in restaurants or indeed in supermarkets as well.
I was going to say, go back 10 years. I'd struggle to find this.
Yeah, absolutely. But a delicious dish. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you very much.
What I haven't done is show a little picture, but we've got so busy talking about it. Sorry, members, I've not shown. So there's the map of Austria. Let me get the next picture up. So there we go. So this is the dish. Bulgur wheat, as you say, there were the chili flakes and honey.
Yes, carrots and parsnips. They are very good, like earthy, like sort
Those
of
root veg,
flavors.
yeah.
It's lovely. You know, you can serve it cold, you can serve it hot. It's a lovely dish. Easy to make. You can make in advance, and yes, it's lovely.
And I think kind of like
It's got a texture, and it goes with the wine really well.
Yeah.
And you can add almost, anything to it that you would make it lovely. Yes.
I think kind of like the pearl barley, it has a subtle flavor by itself, but it just lends itself to absorbing everything.
Yeah.
You kind of pair with it, you mix with it, then it's like anything, isn't it? The longer you leave it there, the more flavor it's going to absorb.
Exactly. Yes.
Can only be a good thing.
And speaking of wine, a beautiful segue into the wine there, Paolo. We have decided on a rosé wine. So members, I've just popped that up on the screen here. Our Painted Wolf Rosé Pinotage from South Africa. It's a brand new vintage, 2024. But I personally really loved how the ripe fruit, this isn't a sweet rosé at all, but the ripe fruit characters really worked beautifully with the spice of the heat, the warmth in the dish, enveloped that, just sort of softened the heat. But you had all that flavor and all the elements come through. And the acidity as well stood up strong, and the flavors in the wine stood up strong to a lot of great balanced flavors in the dish as well. So I was I was very impressed. I hope you guys were as well. Or I put this wine into the taste.
No, definitely. I think heat is it can be such a tricky thing to pair with. You get it right and it makes the wine sing, it makes the dish sing. You get it wrong, you can't taste the wine. The balance in the meal is thrown completely out. So you need a little touch of sort of that extra fruitiness and the weight, and this has got that. And
now, I think the goat cheese as well, it cuts off, the spicy and the whole, you've got spices in there, chili, but the goat cheese is sort of cuts off and it brings, a lovely flavor. And it pairs really nicely with the wine that we have now. Yes.
And also it's one of those that we don't often, I say we, it's less often, I suppose, perhaps, that we think of a rosé or pair rosés with food. We'll sort of go to a red or a white. Rosé is not as widely consumed at this time of year. It's more of very much a sort of summer or a warmer climate. But actually, a rosé can often be much better as a food pairing.
Yes.
Than a white wine, or it has that little bit of both worlds. It's got a little bit of grip and structure, and a slight, potentially at least, a little bit of tannin from the maceration, and from that skin contact. But it has then that wonderful freshness and brightness and a light character as well, so it doesn't overpower dishes. Rosés are definitely something that should be tried more. So we were very keen and very happy that this worked so well, in our opinion.
Yeah, and if you ever come to one of the lunches here at Stevenage, you'll probably find at least one rosé. I've been pushing them quite heavily into our mix, into the menus, because I love them. I think they're so versatile for pairing with food. I think, as you say, it kind of ticks all the boxes. It can float between starter, main course, and to be honest, most of them are just delicious by themselves anyway. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. But the wine itself, so this is Painted Wolf, as I mentioned here. This is Emma and Jeremy Borg. They founded this estate sort of 2005, 2006. Both have had a fairly extensive experience with wine prior to. Jeremy working for about 20 years or so in various wineries in South Africa, but also in the UK and in the US as well. Emma, I think, was sort of wine photography rather than necessarily within the winery, but they've been around viticulture and wines for many years. But this was possibly one of those kind of fortuitous beginnings where a friend had some excess fruit, who grew grapes, and they sort of, I imagine the conversation went a bit like, "Hey guys, what do you think? You've been saying you'll do this for years." I don't know how the conversation went, but the history tells us that they took that opportunity, took that chance, and the rest is there in the history books. You know, so they've been producing, as I say, since 2006, and right from the outset, their aim was twofold. It was to produce wines, to produce great wines from the Western Cape, from South Africa, but also to raise money and raise awareness to protect the endangered African wild dog, which we see on the label. If I can bring that back up as well, hopefully it's clear on the label here. But this is very much something that's at the root of and at the heart of this estate. And actually, I sort of read that from that point. So where are we? Almost 20 years later, they've raised over 4 million rand, which is coming to close to 200,000 pounds. Just themselves with this, for various conservation projects and the African wild dog. So it's not just great wines that they're producing, but there's a wonderful, conservation and a kind of societal and a cultural kind of background to this as well. And they pick their grapes from a variety of sources. They work with a variety of growers and grape growers and producers, all of which either organically plant or sustainable viticulture. They're very precise in that respect in what they need. So everything has to be for the benefit and the health of the land and of the area around. And this particular wine, Painted Wolffish Rosé, comes from two different spots or two different sites, multiple vineyards, but in the Voorpaardenberg and in Swartland are where the grapes for this 100% Pinotage Rosé comes from. And so I'll just show a map because I'm hoping this works. There we are.
There we go.
So we sort of see what we got here, 6 different areas of that Western Cape, and these are all vineyards that Painted Wolf get their wines, they'll source their grapes from. So we can see here, if you can see my cursor, we're looking at this kind of area here, just north of Paarl. This is the area that we're looking at for this wine, where these grapes have been grown in the Voorpaardenberg and in, as I say, in Swartland. Very warm, hot, dry climates here. Voorpaardenberg in particular actually is that little bit cooler. It's a little closer to the Atlantic. It still has a bit of
you've got that kind of freshness bringing in.
Exactly, and the slopes as well. There's a mountain range or sort of rocky outcrop or granitic outcrop nearby where the vineyards are planted. So you have this kind of cooling influence and a diurnal shift, a bit cooler in the evenings than it is in the day. So I always akin it to, the grapes have a little time in the fridge overnight just to cool and just to slow the process. So we get beautiful ripe fruit, but that retains a lot of that delicate characteristics, the delicate aromatics and flavors, and high-bred acidity as well, which is exactly what you want in a rosé, and certainly what you get in a rosé of this quality, and we see it in abundance in the glass. And again, as I mentioned with the first one, I think Swartland in particular, the history here, certainly up until the 1990s, was not viticulture. The majority there was wheat.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
A little bit as well in Voorpaardenberg, but definitely in Swartland, this was wheat country. This is where the wheat fields grew and continued. But it wasn't until the sort of 1990s that we started to see viticulture take over. And now this area, Swartland, is where some of the most iconic, some incredible fruit, old vine fruit as well, because viticulture has been there for many, many years. It's just that it wasn't a dominant feature of the agricultural landscape. But yeah, if you're looking to seek out some of the most up and coming, the most exciting, the incredible quality of wines from South Africa, Swartland's a very good place to look. Old bush vines, unirrigated, low yields, but very high quality and lots of concentration of fruit. And yeah, I very much enjoy this wine, which I don't know if that's coming across. I think it's coming across.
No, it hasn't really.
I thought be subtle, but no, I thought it pairs beautifully with the food.
It does. So, for reference, we tried a couple of other rosés as well at the time. So we tried it with the Muga Rioja Rosado, and then we tried it with the Casa Melinda, so from Portugal. So from Spain, Portugal. Again, both of them also worked in different ways. I think that the Muga was a little bit heavier. And it brought out a little bit more of the earthy notes in the dish. The Ermelinda was just a bit fresher, a bit lighter. It was a lovely counterpart, but we just thought the Ross, it just lifted it, and everything was balanced. The sweetness of the root veggies were balanced. It was matched. The goat's cheese was allowed to be cut by the acidity there, and it just works really, really well. But again, a lot of rosés would work,
Yes.
and I think a lot of white wines would work. I think the Gruner would probably be a pretty good pairing. Certainly, Viognier would be wonderful.
Mhm.
You know, I think this is the wonderful thing about food and wine pairing. It's all about playing with it, trying, and it's different experience. And you know, what works here for me could be completely different for me
Exactly.
tomorrow, or you right now. You might hate this, and you're
Yeah.
just being polite.
It's like when we tried these dishes before with all the wines that we had, it was quite difficult to find one that we thought like this is perfect.
Yeah.
But all the others worked as well as the ones that we're showing tonight, which is great because you know the food with like a lot of flavor on it. We had about how many wines we had, Gil, the last time? About 6 or 7 different wines, and they all
Yeah.
sort work on a different way, like Jim mentioned before. And this is great because it means that you know you can actually buy these wines and drink them with some different foods that will sort of pair them like perfectly. Yes.
Mhm. As you say, Jim, we're all, our perceptions, our tastes, our experiences are all very different. So we're loving this. I'm using the royal we now for all three of us.
I think that's fair.
And I can see a comment here as well from one of our members. Lovely rosé works well with the chili and the salad.
Absolutely.
That's it.
You know,
Yes,
that
perfect.
for me was it.
Yes.
I love warmth. I love chili heat. I love that spice.
Yes.
But I like it to be not so much moderated. But I don't want it to overpower anything. It doesn't anyway without the wine. But the wine just adds just a little extra something,
Yes.
a little extra spark. It works so well with that chili that you get that heat, but it's not over the top at all. Very good, like that.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, out of
Great.
interest, if anyone is there with something different with the same dish, what is it? Is it working? Is it not working? And you know, conversely, you've got the same dish with a different wine. Yeah, it's always really interesting to hear how people's experiences with food and wine change. So
Yeah.
please do let us know.
Oh, yes, please.
Absolutely.
Okie dokie. Shall we move on to our final?
Yes,
I mean,
let's do it.
I'm eyeing the dish up. It's rather tasty.
What are you going to? Yes, you're going to disclose your.
I mean, this is lovely. We've been eating this and drinking the wine almost all day long, haven't we, Jim?
Speak for yourself. I wouldn't disclose that. I would, if I could, I would have been. So we've covered a couple of grains, and then to mix things up, we have got a pulse involved, and we are heading into cannellini beans.
Ooh, lovely.
I think as Paolo, as you said right at the beginning, there's so many different types of beans. We could be here all day. So we thought we'd just sort of pick one and stick with it. And given your Italian background, cannellini was the obvious choice.
Yes, definitely. Yes, you can do a lot with cannellini beans, but you know you can add sort of any flavor to it. We've got here, you know, garlic, onions, coriander, chives, parsley, cumin seeds. But you know, you can do a lot with it. You know, you can almost eat it as it comes from the tin, really, because you know it's got so much flavor on it.
And actually, that's a point there. So I'm just showing the picture there of the dish in front of us. You mentioned about sort of straight from the tin or using.
Yes.
Again, 10 years ago, certainly, I would suggest from memory, at least 10 years, you couldn't find a lot of these pulses as readily again as we are now.
Yeah,
certainly not here. Yeah,
certainly not in the UK. Able to pull the off the shelf and be able to cook with them and use them quite as widely as we are now available to. And it's great that we can, because it produces dishes like this.
And it's great, you know, when you think like a tinned beans, you think like more or less like baked beans. But you know, you can buy all sorts of different beans: cannellini, borlotti, you know, red kidney beans, pinto beans. They all have a different flavor, but you know, it's so easy to make a dish with it because you can almost add anything you want or anything you like, and you'll be very, you know, a nice dish. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember living with a couple from Colombia, and they always had a pot of beans on the side that was always soaking. So they'd have one pot on the go that was soaking, and then when that was ready, they'd cook that, and they'd get another pot soaking for the next day. And
So you always,
just
it's like making bread, really,
yeah,
more or less.
yeah,
So yes, yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I hadn't realized before we did this that cannellini beans are just white kidney beans.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is it took me a lot of searching and going round and round and round on the internet. Oh, it's just white kidney beans, which
Yeah.
is quite interesting, really.
I mean, you know, coming from South America, we eat a lot of beans.
Mhm.
You know, we have sort of we almost have beans every day. We use black beans,
Yep.
and we use quite a lot of pinto beans as well, which you know, you can put, you know, pork in it. You can,
Yep.
you know, put a belly of pork. It's endless what you can do with it, and it adds a different flavor. And you know, it's a really nice thing to, you know, to have, especially at winter time.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say about the South American connection.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of the beans did originate sort of Central South
Yes.
America, and then they've kind of moved around. Obviously, you've got the concept of the three sisters in the
Yes.
Americas, where you've got your beans, corn, and squash.
That's
And
right.
you kind of
Yes.
plant them all together, and you've got the nitrogen fixing from the beans. The squash kind of grows up, and then so you got the corn growing, the beans grow around the corn, and it all works in synergy. So
Simultaneously. Yeah.
it's fantastic. So I think with the cannellini, it's kind of it's South America. They think Peru.
Yes.
There's a lot of conjecture.
Peru, Argentina, as it sort of seemed, yeah, very.
Yeah,
It's different because you see, I come from Brazil. Up north, we have a lot of cannellini beans, but then down to São Paulo, which is more or less in the middle, they will have pinto beans.
Yep.
And then in the south, they won't eat any other beans apart from black beans, which, you know, it's a different texture, flavor, but it's a lovely dish you can make with it. Yes.
Yeah. And then just as you were mentioning about Brazil and different dishes, and gato pinto is a dish that I think of, pinto beans and black beans. I haven't been to Brazil, despite my constant request to head out there. But Costa Rica is another where I have been to, and again, it's so widely consumed, pulses in particular.
Yes.
There, and nothing wrong with that. I thoroughly enjoyed all of the dishes I had across Costa Rica, and highly recommend the country. Just
there we go.
You know,
excellent.
for more than just food. But yeah, it's interesting you saying there that even in one nation as Brazil, being a large country in terms of north to south there, and then the kilometers between, but north and central and south, you've got those differences there in terms of what's most consumed or the popular and most planted. You know, it's part of that sort of, once we start doing this, once we start going down that path of research into food groups, you kind of uncover all these other things. You go, right, I'm going to now go off and to that, and I'm going to go here, and you know, it's just a fascinating thing to look into and research and talk about and taste. You know, thoroughly enjoyable, but a delicious dish. And I like, it's not a pulse, but I love the pitta, that kind of crunch and the texture of the pitta,
the texture.
I love that.
Yes.
With it, it's certainly a dish that I could happily consume regularly.
Excellent.
Why do you think I kept coming up here earlier during the day?
Is that why?
I kept visiting Paolo and finding excuses to come and have a chat.
I did wonder.
Guilty.
But so with the dish, we've paired this with a red wine. So we've kind of gone white,
which is lovely,
rosé, and a red. An element of design, I suppose, in that, you know, from us, we wanted to show different styles of wines completely. But as you mentioned, with the rosé in particular, all three of these wines actually work quite nicely in very different ways with all three dishes. Yeah. Which is quite a lot of fun, sort of putting that together, just seeing how they interact and change.
Yeah, and they do change, which is, again, it's like what I said, it's so interesting seeing what changes things, which little ingredient in a dish perks up with certain wines.
But here we went for something
completely off the beaten track,
quite different, but absolutely delicious and worked brilliantly with the dish. So I'm going to share it now if you wanted to.
Yeah, so we've gone to Turkey for this one. And I've got to be completely honest, this was probably the first First time I've had anything from Turkey, and we have it's an indigenous variety, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time in case I butchered the name. I'm not a Turkish speaker, so if anyone is a Turkish speaker, please do let us know how we pronounce it. We spent a good 20 or so minutes in the office going round and round the internet guessing. So I'm going to say it's Okoshkozu.
That's a very nice accent.
Thank you. I
Very
tried.
good.
That's my interpretation, and so if I am wrong, I apologize. But it's a fantastic indigenous variety, which gets quite a few sort of likeness. What's the word?
Comparisons.
Yeah, thank you. To Pinot Noir. So it's quite a light in tannins, very soft, very fine tannins, nice levels of acidity, and then juicy ripe berry fruit. And it does tend to bring out the terroir as well. So it is quite site descriptive, I think, for want of a better word.
Another reason so why it's likened, I suppose, to Pinot Noir, and a great variety that does very much speak of its soils, speak of where it's grown.
Yeah.
But it's a tremendous grape that I hadn't known too much about. I knew of, and I must have tasted at some point. I know I've tasted these wines from Vincada before, and they are delicious. But it had been a little while. I'll confess and own up to that. But it worked so well with the dish. Just a beautifully open, inviting, expressive, ripe, full-bodied, sort of medium to full-bodied, lots of character on the wine. But didn't overpower the dish in any way. Just really worked and brought everything out, all the enjoyable flavors and components of both. Just sort of stuck to sing. But I'll just share the final here, just to show a map of where we're talking about here. So Kalachik in Turkey is the region. Vincada Wine House is the name of the producer, and they're a family-run operation as far as I remember or know. But their beginnings weren't in wine. Am I right there? The beginnings were sort of civil engineer and sort of the US market for 20 or so years, and then decided sort of in the 1960s, I think, to purchase land in Kalachik in Turkey. So I'll stop sharing there, but give you an idea of where we're talking. So we're kind of northwestern Anatolian region, I think, wine region.
Yeah, so you're very much into continental climate up in the mountains. So we're sitting at sort of 650 meters above sea level, which brings us right back to that concept of acidity, as we had with the rosé. You know, your diurnal range, real intense sunlight during the day, so that everything gets beautifully ripened to get that intense berry flavors. But that nighttime shift is what gives you that acidity and that lift, which is what balances the wine, and it balances the dish perfectly.
Yeah, and they've got at Vincada, that it's all about indigenous varietals and promoting indigenous varieties. This is one of, I think, from a red wines or red grape category, maybe 3 or 4 different indigenous varieties. It's not the most planted that they of their varietals.
No, it's not.
By a long shot, one sort of overly dominates in that respect, but they are champions of these indigenous grape varieties. The soils, the climate, everything in their region is very similar to wine regions that produce some of the most well-known and most well-loved global wine as well. You're thinking of climates where the likes of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot thrive. This has all, well, more than just potential. We're seeing it in the glass. The quality speaks for itself. And we love the fact that it went so well, and an opportunity to talk about a wine that we don't often talk about, which is something we need to correct.
We need to address
that. But they've got a state-of-the-art winery. They've got these sort of humidity and temperature controlled cellars, French oak barrels. They're kind of their own, again, state-of-the-art kind of press systems. So everything is absolutely geared to that quality. Quality of wine that speaks of its place, that speaks of Turkey, and speaks of just great wine to enjoy.
Very much modern winemaking in a very historic region. So I think they've been producing wine in sort of Anatolia for best part of 5,000 years. I think they've found remains and archaeological evidence from sort of 3000 BC. So there's been consistent winemaking in the region. Not too dissimilar to a place like Georgia in that respect. So they're kind of keeping everything a link to the past through through this modern style, very technical winemaking, very clean, very just precise, very, very tasty.
Excellent. Very good wine.
Yes,
Excellent. Yes.
I'm glad.
It pairs it really nice. I mean, there's not, a lot of ingredients on this dish. We got garlic, onions, cumin seeds. We got za'atar spice, which they use quite a lot on the pita bread. Extra virgin olive oil, and then we have chili oil, and we've got tahini as well. Tahini is great. It works really well with beans and other dishes as well. But we mix the tahini with a bit of lemon juice and a little tiny bit of honey just to cut the acidity of the lemon. And I think it's great. It's a simple dish, but it's lovely. It will go with many sort of, Pinot Noir, like Jim mentioned before. It's lovely. Yes.
And I think, again, we got that heat from the chili. So trying to balance that with
the
red can be
especially
really
with the tahini. I think it's a very good balance between the tahini with lemon juice and honey, and then the chili oil, which it's sort of it's a good combination. Very good
It
combination.
is, and I think as we've said when we were tasting it all, these are fantastic dishes in and of themselves. I'm not complaining eating these at all. But they I mean, if not, I'm going to be polite about it, aren't I? They're fantastic bases. You could serve them with fish, with meats, with different cuts.
And we actually had some flatbread to go with it, and some crispy pita bread that's mixed with spices, and it gives you the texture, the flavor, and it's a simple, very nice dish. To have it. Yes.
But as you say, Jim, you can put alongside this on the plate. You can put a number of different options.
Yes.
Whether chicken, fish,
pork, or
we can keep going.
We can keep going.
All the different, but there's no need. There's a great deal of flavor and balance.
Yes.
And back to kind of staple food nutrients within these dishes. I mean, for yourself, you make it sound very simple when you're putting all that. You explain, you're a professional chef. So I'm taking this going, I don't know if it will take me quite as quick as that.
40 minutes normally just to chop the veg.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is why I said
it takes
post setup, post organizing everything and getting the right ingredients and the right measurements. How long does it take? Because that's the bit that takes me the most time. But
finding the things in the cupboard for me.
You need to get the ingredients together before you make it, start on the cooking. But it's simple, it's nice, it's not very expensive, and you can use things that you have on your cupboard. You don't have to buy a lot of stuff. Great. Yes.
Yeah, very much. And of course, we've covered the topic this evening of grains and pulses, which was probably an ambitious attempt to cover all of grains and pulses in an hour and with 3 dishes.
Yes.
There are an abundance of dishes that we've missed, or ingredients and food types that we've missed.
We've also completely neglected the fact that beans and pulses just work. If you think rice and beans, South America, Africa.
Exactly. We eat rice and beans. Sort of daily basis.
Yeah, I mean across America, Africa, Asia, it's common as well.
Yes.
It's everywhere that they grow. It's a combination because you've got the protein loaded beans, you've got the extra fiber in the grains. It's so nutritious.
Yeah, excellent. I thought a good place for our debut for this theme. I think for global staples.
Oh yes,
but we've got to think of where to go next. So members, if there's anything. Any other staple food? We've mentioned tomatoes, we've mentioned rice. Certainly we thought that should have its own. Arguably we could maybe do everything could have its own, but we thought rice needed its own moment.
Yes,
its own session. Potato, sort of animal product as well, but the idea for us really for this particular event is we'll hold this kind of once every few months. So we're looking into the new year for our next, and try and keep it, as I said at the beginning, with relatively sort of seasonally. So we thought
Yeah.
this time of year, let's do grains and pulses. Let's do these sort of harvested plant, in September's, October's, and let's enjoy these warming dishes this time of year. So I'm not quite sure when it means that our next one would likely come around. Is that March maybe?
I think
For
it
this
probably is
particular-
March. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you have any suggestions, anything you'd like us to cover on this, do send us an email, tastings@thewinesociety.com. Let us know what you want us to cover in the next edition of
Yes.
Staple Foods. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
been
very much.
great
Thank you.
to enjoy
It's
three
been a
great
pleasure.
dishes, three great wines on this Friday evening. Members, thank you very much for joining us as well. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope if you've had the dishes, you've enjoyed those dishes, enjoyed sort of tasting, perhaps, or taking your taste buds to places that they haven't been before with these wine pairings and foods, or perhaps just revisiting dishes that you've had.
Or any tips for the dishes?
Yeah.
If we can add anything, or if you need a recipe or anything, please just contact us. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, enjoy the rest of your Friday evening. Enjoy your weekend, members, and we'll see you again at another online event or in person soon.
There you
Thank
go.
you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.